Muy bien, muy buenas noches. En esta oportunidad vamos a hacer un videito, o voy a hacer un videito sobre ISO 42001-2023, ¿no? Sistema de gestión de inteligencia artificial. Muy bien, muy bien. Bueno, estoy aquí en el portal de GSD Council, muy bien, una casa certificadora transnacional que ofrece diferentes certificaciones, la cual nosotros somos partners, somos Corigitech SAC. El quien habla es Amador Alejandro Serra Foronda, apoderado de Corigitech SAC, ¿no? Cuyo link es www.corigitech.com. Muy bien. Entonces, aquí hay una serie de cursos, nos vamos a dirigir al que dice 42.001-2023, Lead Implementer. Muy bien. Muy bien, nos vamos a dirigir aquí al caso de estudio. Muy bien. Acá está el cuerpo de conocimientos y el caso de estudio, ¿no? Acá dice, por ejemplo, acá hay un videito, ¿no? Vamos a escuchar ese videito que está en inglés, pero después voy a tratar de resumirlo muy bien para ustedes, para que puedan entenderlo. Bueno, está en inglés y también en español yo lo voy a explicar muy bien, como un resumen, muy bien. Entonces vamos acá, dice show, vamos a mostrar, a ver. Muy bien, este videito dura aproximadamente 55 minutos. Los que desean pueden escuchar el videito o pueden adelantar, ¿no? Porque al final voy a explicar en qué consiste el videito o de qué trata el autor, muy bien, o el orador o el expositor, muy bien. Muy bien, entonces al final del videito voy a tratar de explicar todo, muy bien, haciendo un resumen, obviamente.
I've used artificial intelligence in the presentation, and I'll jump just now, but just to frame that first cover picture there, that is, I just typed in randomly an artificial intelligence graphic generation tool to say artificial intelligence bored, someone looking bored about artificial intelligence. And that's what came up to that picture, which, and so it generates something which you've got to be a little bit, maybe a bit innovative to try and see the link in some cases. Other cases, it will be quite clear exactly what that's about. Okay, so there was a comment that I read this morning, which of course, and the comment said, artificial intelligence is not going to take your job away. Artificial intelligence will probably take your job away from you. Okay. And that I think is a key message for the short term. Maybe in 10 years' time, artificial intelligence is going to take all our jobs away. I don't think so. I think that's what we'll talk about. But by showing you how I decided to edit the way I did my presentation by using artificial intelligence today, I'll start to give you the hints. And I could have done a lot more. I just actually went, let me start getting more into artificial intelligence. Half my presentation made using artificial intelligence presentation solution tool. The other half is literally made from graphics from a presentation, a place where you just type in, I want a picture showing Michelangelo throwing a rock at Charlie Chaplin. And to do that for you, you can come up with anything. The scope relatively wide by using simple artificial intelligence tools, not complex ones. I was able to, instead of spending an hour creating one slide with a picture and graphics, in one line, and it gave me something. Now, of course, I'm left it like this on purpose. So you can see the quality is good, but it still needs more. It needs more human interaction. It needs more involvement. Okay, but the core of what we're talking about today is the ISO 42001. The standard itself is an interesting standard, and we talk about both the good and the bad. It's got a lot of potential, and it can be used about the value of certification against it. And I haven't, and a lot of people have never even heard of it. So the marketing behind it is not great. So let's dive into that and talk about why and how. And it. Okay, let me see if I can first. Okay, so those are the core used here. If you go to Gemini,
Hi, David, sorry to interrupt you. I guess your screen is not shared yet.
Yeah. I did share it and obviously stop sharing, because you shared,
yes.
that's right.
Yeah,
okay,
no
let me go back here. Go back to the first picture so you can see what I was talking about then. Share screen. Okay. All right, thank you. You guys see it now, I assume you can.
Yes, it's visible now.
Okay. about with the AI being bored. So artificial intelligence, boring. See that element there of computers, robots. It's going to be a trend throughout the course where things are taking over. But that is like, is it really that exciting? And a lot of people have that mindset. Artificial intelligence, it's there. I'm not really going to. People haven't changed their behavior, or other people have changed their behavior extensively because of but all of us, it's actually somehow we are actually using it without about that as case studies just now. So as I was saying, those are the solutions that I use to make this presentation. Now, the Gemini.google.com is really simple. You type that in and that generates pictures for you. This picture there on purpose is actually from PowerPoint. It's not actually a generated picture from Gemini.google, but the one you saw before, and I'll show you now. We talked through. I asked it for different slants on artificial intelligence. You'll see there's a funny one, a serious one, whatever one, as we go through the course. Any picture tends to not like people, doesn't want to choose. I think there's a bit of a thing where they've had to update the software, but you can do a lot. You can say, I want a sunset in Hawaii picture, and then you can draw the sunset in Hawaii picture and then go, all right, well, I don't like this and that about it. I wanted more beach, less ocean, going at that angle, and you can then edit the picture to make it what you want. That's relatively simple stuff, but really, really powerful when instead of going to Google and then having to worry about intellectual property and stealing somebody's picture, you can actually generate a lot of things, and that's going to get stronger and stronger. Beautiful.ai is one of countless PowerPoint solutions where it's the same thing. I type in a one-liner. I want a flow diagram of ISO certification. It shows you the ISO certification program, and I'll show you a BR tool and a whole history of AI drawn in a very simple way that I could actually bring it to and use you. So I've used a couple of other locations as well, but that one is really good because it gives you a nice, simple explanation of all the sort of details. So highly recommend you start playing with these tools to do it. And I'm sure there's far better ones. So maybe things that are more interesting that can add to this. We can all make better presentations. We can all have fun with presentations. We can all enhance the way we do things. And that's, I'm hoping I can prove it today in this presentation. Okay, so that's the AR1 comedy one. Artificial intelligence picture gives you that, sort of puts it together. We're going to talk in history, and I'm a history nut, so I thought other people are not really going to talk about how far along artificial intelligence started being spoken all the way through to the current day. And there are a lot of people that talk about it in the 20th century, 21st century, artificial intelligence for literally ever, in thought at least, which I'll talk to you about now. A little bit about the security angles, and a lot of people are going to go on that, but a lot of the presentations we've been on, they don't really talk about security and AI, and they talk a bit about ethics. The security aspects are related to artificial intelligence. That's a completely separate long presentation that I think I'll do later on, but I'm going to give you a little bit of a bite on it now. Then we'll go ahead and talk about the standard, what it is, how it's been set up, and where do we go from here in terms of certification. Time at the end. Okay, simple 4 things to talk about, but as you can see, there's a lot to talk quite a while on those 4 things alone. Okay, a little bit about us. Work for InfoSec Advisory Group. We do a lot of but we also do a lot of other security operations, penetration testing, consultancy. We are very lucky that we've got clients all over the world and we can work remotely for most of them, which really is great. Our team really enjoying the AI angles. We've been using it for quite a lot for solutions, methodologies, trying to work out better ways to work with how we can use it in consultancies, building partnerships with business intelligence, data gathering, people who are directly in AI in order for consultancy. And a lot of people we talk to have never heard of 42001. So part of what I'm doing today, and I'm going to hopefully present this similar type things on this a few times to be able to grow the knowledge of 42001. So I do think, and at least in some way, it can be very useful. So if I was on a course, I'd ask people to guess when artificial intelligence was first used, when the concepts first brought out. Most people would guess sort of 1950s is when the first term of it came out. Okay, so artificial intelligence, as a concept has actually been around since a very, very long time ago. The definition of it is talking about creating intelligence systems that can replicate human intelligence and problem. And obviously it needs to learn some way. So it learns from taking data, and in order to improve in the future, it takes data and it finds a way to learn from it. There's a lot of the difference between machine learning and artificial intelligence, where the line is often they're used incorrectly, the one term used for the other. But the fact is artificial intelligence is something about learning, about streamlining. Now, a computer, as we know, doesn't have a brain like a human, so it needs to do this through other ways. Okay, and I know you've seen quite a lot of definition information about artificial intelligence. So it's a quick slide just to bring it together. Interesting, a lot of those sort of guys were doing in the Renaissance was where they were building things that could actually take on, like the constructs move. They were building helicopters and submarines, which had an element of what you call automatons, which was first brought out by the Greeks. So the first elements of a creature type of idea where the ancient philosophers created something which could actually take on human characteristics, and they were done through Greek philosophy. One of the most famous is something that you might have seen from similar names when you look at things like the Avengers, where creatures were taken and made into these automatons. Okay, and if you can look there, an example, massive constructs designed in order to fight. If you go back to the Greeks. So it's actually very interesting that already in those days, philosophers were thinking of things like artificial intelligence. How do I create something that implicates human behavior? And when I was reading about this 2 or 3 days ago, I was like, wow, that actually is sort of mind-blowing to think how long ago we were already doing this. I don't know about the prehistoric times, but we're talking about BC here, where they were things. So then we got to the early 1900s, and the first term robot was used in the early 1900s, Czech Republic. And we found quite funny when we researched this, when you typed on G and you said, where does the word robot come from? It actually told you it comes from, and it was on the call, are even from those countries or know that well. But the Czechs came up with a construct, something that was made to do tasks for humans, think like humans, and possibly even replace humans in certain context. Okay, so that's years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, that these robots started coming to the equation. And by then already people were starting to find ways to make very simple robots already in that generation. Then there was the first artificial intelligence term. And Arthur Samuel, who was an American scientist, he created something that could play chess. And it was the first checkers, not chess, checkers that could then be played by somebody and hopefully beat humans through checkers. To our movies later, where movies were made later, where the first things they could do was through games. From that, in 1956, there was a conference in Dartmouth, artificial intelligence. If you look at that picture, some very interesting, old style people from the 50s, artificial intelligence back then already. This isn't something that came about 2 years ago when everyone found out about ChatGPT. It was something that was thought about quite extensively by these guys. You can imagine most of those people were doctors, PhDs, highly intelligent, highly theoretical, who had already started thinking through this. From that, you start to see the link with movies and things come through over the time. And it's very interesting when you start to think about what people thought was going to happen and then how it does pan out. And that's today, what we think now and how this is going to pan out, we don't really have a clue. We don't really know where it's going to go from here, but we can make some calculated guesses, which is what some of these guys are doing, which is why I'm bringing this history angles for all of you to think about. Maybe in 10 years' time, I'll read you this presentation and we can then look back and go, sure, Bevan, you were completely wrong about that, but hey, that was a good one. You got that one right. Okay. Same long link. A movie called Artificial Intelligence actually came out in 2001. I did see that movie. It had the guy from The Sixth Sense, little kid from The Sixth Sense in it. Very interesting movie. I don't know much. I'm not sure it really was very close to what's happening now. But when you go back, you'll see this movie Metropolis at the bottom came out. It's a German movie in the 1920s already, talking about robots and science fiction and those sort of things. And scams of 2001 are two case studies where the computers take over. They take over. The one tries to start the nuclear war. The other one actually tries to take over a spaceship and stop people from escaping. So they're all really interesting case studies to have in mind about where it could go. We've been scared. We've been terrified all the way from the BC of us creating something and then taking over from us. And I think that's also something to resonate in your mind, to think about that we've been worried about it since before Christ was born, and we've still got jobs. Okay, I mean, let's see now that things are changing, but understand that if you go with it, you work with it, you can actually go very far using this stuff. Okay, the last one is this weekend. Don't know, maybe I'm getting a bit of a tenuous link to artificial intelligence, but if you saw the England versus England versus Switzerland game, you'll see that England had taken all the details of the penalty takers and put them on a water bottle. But you can see it's not scribbled little notes. This is clear instructions where they'd used data analysis and maybe not too much artificial intelligence, but it's not too far away from where we could use artificial intelligence. Every single penalty taker for the Swiss team and how they were going to take the penalty and where they were going to take the penalty. And the goalkeeper, between every penalty, takes a sip of his water bottle and he has a look. And if you look there, it's very interesting. It doesn't just say left or right. It says dive left, or it says just move left, because they've worked out through all the statistics that the one guy, so the guy who missed the penalty, his penalty was saved, the keeper actually dived far to the left because on his water bottle it said dive left. And he got it exactly right from that point. So they'd used the statistics, the data, theoretically artificial intelligence, to work out statistical probabilities of me. I've taken 100 penalties and I'll take 98 left and 2 right. Easy, it's going left. But if I've done 50-50, they've got to work it out based on my preference, based on a few other statistics. Very interesting there. England had an inherent confidence in the penalties where they were taking penalties out, looking at their head was up. They knew they were going to place the penalties, and the goalkeeper had a confidence stroke arrogance in terms of how he was going to save the penalties. He got close to a few, and he made a massive save. Really interesting angles again on this. I loved reading just that extra detail, not just move left, move right, dive, stand still, the guy's going to take it through the middle, working out, or waiting until the last minute because the guy shoots very late. All those stats are generated from it, and you as a human are behaving in a way that you always behave, and now you either have to realize that they've got this water bottle and you've got to change all your behavior, or hope that they've got the thing wrong on the water bottle. It's a whole topic by itself, and I think I need to present there going forward. It's very, very interesting. Okay, so there's my slide on scary, and that's the point that many of us are scared. When we talk about security, we often do use very scary pictures. That's, your monsters, your robots, your Terminators, things that are coming to kill us all in the future. Things that hopefully are not realistic. We see lots of dystopian movies and things where they talk about that occurring, and we can just hope that that's not the way it's going to pan out. But yeah, if we behave in the wrong way, we keep our eye off the ball. These things. So couple, the one or something where the most prevalent use of AI last year was an attack where they just used artificial intelligence to take your voice and to create a copy of your voice. And as this got more advanced, it could work out, your nuances, what your sayings are, where you stop to breathe, how you talk, how you raise your voice, lower your voice. Those are things. Now deepfakes are going the extra step. So a deepfake now will be able to do this, create an image of me, and I can talk to you and I can ask you for money. I can canvas to pretend to be Donald Trump, and I can create all these scams. And because of the artificial intelligence, you're taking it beyond just a copy. You're taking it into something where I'm able to actually analyze and use that information to try and generate something which is believable. That's security implication of artificial intelligence. I've seen a lot of little videos and stories watching BBC and CNN, stuff like that, where they explain how they can clone you through artificial intelligence, how they can take a copy of you through the use of it. So it's very, very interesting. Something for all of us to be aware about. That is going to come, and it's really coming. They're going to try and pretend to be the finance director, to transfer money to a new vendor. They're going to use it for financial theft as much as possible because you're going to believe that I'm actually me on the screen. And you're seeing that day by day as it's getting improving, as artificial intelligence has been used to make that better. Okay, artificial intelligence risk management, understanding what your risks are. And the theme you're going to see now when we talk about the standard. What are my risks in terms of artificial intelligence, my use of it, and how other parties can use artificial intelligence? So you won't know until you actually look at your scenarios, look at what you've got, understand your risks. So I'm going to come back to that because we'll talk about that in terms of the standard later. And ethics is the underlying thing that comes through again and again. We were doing a risk assessment and we were talking a lot about ethics in terms of risk. How do we know, ethically that what we're doing in artificial intelligence is being used correctly? It's an aspect of the standard. And ethics is always a funny thing for me because you don't know if every country, every society thinks in the same way. If we go to Russia right now and we see the way, and we compare it to the way things will be done in Germany, you'll see some major impact difference in terms of ethically how things are applied. And for AI, that's a very interesting issue. So the EU law on AI has focused a lot on that, on ethics as its focus, because it's really about ethically how we apply artificial intelligence and very close link to security. Okay, there's lots of laws. That slide there is like, I just want you to know, there's many other laws. I'm going to focus on three of them. The first one is the one I just mentioned now, the EU Artificial Intelligence Act. It's relatively recent. I think it was passed last year. And it talks a lot about those things we spoke about now. A risk-based approach, transparency and accountability, and, but using standards that are the same, coming up with an approach. So what they want is everybody in the EU to apply a similar approach. And that's why this act has been generated. It is a framework, it's a regulatory framework, trying to talk about innovation together with looking after rights. So when you are looking at artificial intelligence and you want to know, what do I do? How do I apply standards? Taking 42001 and this act, for example, gives you a really good basis of a framework, something that you need to do that makes it legal, especially if you are in the EU. There's one more thing, the standard on how you do risk assessments on AI. I think this is a very utilized thing. Very few people in the world are doing comprehensive risk assessments of the use of artificial intelligence that we've seen. And I do think there's a big market for people that want to actually understand this better. So we've done this for a couple of clients where we go in and we look at their risks in terms of the usage of artificial intelligence, whether they're not a company selling it or a company using it internally. And there's a lot there in terms of principles, concepts, understanding, what the risks are. Okay, so very nice standard, a lot of detail. It's based on the other NIST standards on risk management. It's just bringing fundamentals of artificial intelligence together. So the three, which we're going to talk about 42001 now, just to show you a little bit in the differences, the two, the NIST standard and ISO are guidelines, but the EU is obviously a law. Focused on specific parts, but all of them have a strong link to risk and risk management. Quite flexible. They can be used across different sectors, AI applications. Obviously, the EU Act is very much applicable to companies in the EU. However, if you want to apply a good framework, but you got 42001, so it's to see which one is fit for purposes. The only one which is a law is the EU one, but as I mentioned, you can do them more globally. Okay, so it gives you a bit of a bound between those three standards. Let's talk about 42001. I see a hand up. Are we going to do questions at the end, or is anything happening before? Let me just check. Okay, I'll carry on and we'll go on to the questions then. I think that's the approach now. Okay, so the standard itself, and that's what I want to talk to you about. This thing is changing so quickly, and it's highly interesting. It's why we're here, because it's an interesting topic. There's a lot to it. So this standard was developed very quickly, probably quicker than any standard that I've seen, because of the reaction, because of the response. But I also we actually found like typos in the standard in the first version that we saw, and we found funnies in it that you think that doesn't really make sense because of the fact that it was rushed. So they did another quick update afterwards, which I don't think has the typos in anymore. But the comment from people are really developing a new one. They're really going, how much has changed in 18 months? How do we come up with a later version of it? And our overall comment for compliance is that you probably wait until that version comes out. But actually, you can use this extensively already. So you can use it, you can support it, you can use it to enhance how you do AI. It's a very good framework, but I do think the new version that probably will come out in a year, I'm guessing now, will have access additional things to it based on how much things have changed. So it's a very dynamic space, as you would guess. Okay, so what is the standard? How are we going to implement it? And then I've already given away the clues in terms of the thoughts of the value and in terms of the certification. So a little bit of a timeline, and a little bit of talking about, so the first standard really came out in 2021. So it's only 3 years that standard there came out at that point. People started implementing in 2022, and you see this ongoing research. So they are busy going through it now. They're updating it. I think for the next 5 years, it may change and then change again because of how quickly the space is changing. But the trick with any standard, all of you that have worked a lot with management systems, is to keep it at a high enough level that you don't too much. And I do think 80% of the standard is written that way, that you won't have to change too much, but there might be a few fundamental things that you need to update, which is why obviously they are researching it. So ISO has been around since 1947. 2021 was the first time we started bringing in artificial intelligence standards. But a lot of the other standards beforehand, specifically quality, is actually a forerunner for 42001. So 42001 is bolted onto quality. And for all of you that have got quality in your company are doing 9001, you could take 9001 and just add in artificial intelligence components to it that way, because you'll see there's a very close alignment between the standards and 42001. Okay, so there's the sections of it there. And if you look at the standard here, you will see that it looks very similar to every other ISMS, QMS, the fundamental standards. It's got from section 4 to section 10. I think if you match it to 27000 or 9001, specifically 9001, you'll see that actually it's the same sections. Yeah, it's almost the same standard. And that's what you need to get your head around it. It's a quality standard, but they've just added in AI-specific sections and AI-specific wording into the standard. The other thing that is important is that you've got controls. You've got controls that are specific to artificial intelligence in the Annex A. And those controls talk about things like making sure that you understand your environment and that you've actually looked at the gaps in terms of how you're using artificial intelligence. There's a very strong correlation, obviously, between development and artificial intelligence in most of these cases. So how do you bring those two elements together, which is what this tries to do. Okay, so quality with AI at its core. That sort of summarizes the standard quite well. But there's going to be things like data quality, risk management, human oversight, bias, ethics, all those things we spoke about earlier. Here's a bit more in terms of standard. It's international standard for artificial intelligence. Key principles, there's some nice words there: accountability, transparency, fairness, privacy, and security. So privacy and security is coming up. In 27001, they've brought the two together quite fundamentally, are very closely tied together. So how do you, in the use of artificial intelligence, not just security, but actually privacy? The others, the accountability, transparency, and fairness, also tie into privacy. There's a close link here, but you want to make sure that you are, you're taking it seriously. You're doing what you need to do. You're creating, and that word ethically, in terms of how you do this again. Ethical and responsible manner. It talks about the whole AI life cycle, all the way from planning through to maintenance and governance, risk management, compliance of your artificial intelligence system. Okay, so cycle, like all these managed systems, are very focused on life cycles, and the organization talks about those. We're going to talk about our governance frameworks, risk management procedures, and how do you get involvement from people, shareholders, internal and external. Okay, it's a comprehensive framework, and as I said, it's comprehensive. But we think, it can be enhanced through maybe bringing in more development stuff there and matching it together. Having a bit more, 27,001 and 42,001 together is a nice fit, or 9,001 and 42,001 together is a nice fit. Okay, so how do we implement it? And we've got 8 steps here to show you how you would implement, and you'll see this is very close to any of you that manage the system on how to do it. So knowing what's in either standard or read something which helps you define what the standard is. Understand what you've got in terms of AI. I'm going to go through different slides now in more detail on this. How are we going to implement this thing? Where do we start? Where do we end? Governance framework on artificial intelligence is a really good one. I'm seeing too many companies that have a good one on this, but you can match it again to data quality, to your development framework. So you can do it different ways. I'm not sure you always have to have a separate thing for everything, but you could if you've got if you AI is your business, for example. Risk management, next level. Risks, look at the controls, make sure you're doing things in a transparent and accountable way. Train, make sure people know what they're doing and how to do it and why they're doing it. And that last one, continuously monitor and improve. This slide is me going, how do I implement ISO 42001? And you'll see from this slide, it gave me this diagram, and then it had the thing. Now, to that point, I would, once again, I'm going to now go in and I'm going to put some numbers in. I'm going to need some up. I'm going to put some more, but I wanted to show you, just give you in terms of how do I implement it. And if you think about how much helps, they want you to quickly find out something in a short answer, and they can use publicly available things, really simple things, quite understandable of the steps I need to do. Now, as a consultant, you might go, but Bevan, number 5 is wrong, or number 3 is missing, and that's part of where we can enhance, where we can improve it. So I didn't go and check it. I came up, but when I read this, I can see something that makes sense. If it's not right, it's very close to being right. But I'll wait for your questions to see if you disagree, which is part of the fun of doing this today. Okay, so step 1. Understand the standard. So this, we had a very good chat last week to a company who does artificial intelligence consulting, quite in the north of England, and he was like, why would I do this? What do I need from it? We're already using quality. What's the extra thing? I already understand risk assessments. I've got an approach for this. So in his case, it was very difficult to sort of see the value of taking the standard and implementing it. He could take components of it. But for another company, his core business is doing this and wants to prove to somebody that they're taking artificial intelligence ethically well done. There's a lot of value in being like also one of the first companies to say, you know what, we're certified in 42001 because we understand how to use artificial intelligence in a great way. How do we do it? How big are we? What's the complexities involved? Those things, time, effort. Do we need certification? To that point question I told you earlier. But then how do we make it work for us? We don't just want to tick a box. We actually want to make it work and improve things, because we don't want to get certified, but then we actually, we make a big mistake and someone comes and sues us, or we lose information because we didn't do it correctly. So, making sure actually a combination of using it effectively and getting value, and can we align it to other things? Don't do it by itself. How does it match to what we're doing on 27,001? Laws, which we can use to match. And a lot of that can be answered in the step. So take that step back and go, all right, maybe we're only going to do part of it because we've already got quality and we're just going to add in components, or we're going to go full on in because we see the value. I like the sort of step where people are thinking this through. So then what have we got in terms of our, where are we using it? How are we using it? And a lot of companies don't know where they're using AI, because maybe you're using it There's 5 users sitting in marketing that have been using it for a year and you don't realize it. So getting that full view of how we use it, where we use it, where guys are planning to use it. And to that point, it's so dynamic right now that you might get a view today and then a month later they actually change and they use it in a different way. And you just don't know that. But if you start raising awareness and telling them, then they can come to you before they use it. All right, we want to adjust how we're using this. We had a case with a client where they weren't using any PR in their AR, and we signed off on it. And then 6 months later, they came to us and said, oh, we want to change the whole thing. We've seen all the value now taking customer data and using it in here. So we had a completely different assessment, completely different risk related to that. And that's a very common issue now with how AI is evolving. Okay, so what have we got currently? Where are we going? How are we using it? Getting that picture. Nice flow diagram, like when you're doing PCR, like when you're doing any other work related to data. Where we got it, where is it, what are we doing with it? If you don't understand that, you can't actually understand other things like the risk, which I think is coming very soon. Okay, develop a plan. How are we going to do this? You can see it's quite a nice little picture there. You know, design, assess risks, how are we going to monitor it, getting feedback, going through right in the internal audit. So very nice, quick one picture. Again, on the internet gives you a starting point in terms of how. Step 4, get the framework in place. The framework in place is the pillars are these 7 things. Again, 5 pillars of an AI governance framework. And with additional research, when you're doing a thesis, you would go and find 5, 10 copies of this and they come up with the most. I've looked and I found on the internet 2 or 3 different ones which were very similar to this in terms of our governance framework. Okay, and you'll see that first word, ethical. Ethical and responsible, they're very nice together. How do I use AI? How do I develop on AI in an ethical and responsible manner? And I love that. I think that's it. And if you do that at the beginning, everything else should tie into how do I ethically and responsibly develop using artificial intelligence. The next one is governing your data and privacy, which already should be in other standards, other processes for big companies. Transparency, how we're using it. The last thing you want is something where you can't explain it. It starts doing something in a very unfair way, and you can't really, there's no transparency on that. There were a couple of case studies of McDonald's using it in stores, taking out all people and trying to artificial intelligence, try and get a store to run without people. And it was a complete disaster because of the decisions it made and the lack of transparency about how it was making those decisions. However, exactly, it's going to get better. And they can take all that data now and then go, why did it, throw ice cream in heads? And why did it, make the hamburgers completely different every single time? What was the reason behind those decisions? And try and go back and go, how do we actually do it better next time? From that, do the risk and go and understand the risks. Now you've understand what you've got. Go and look at the risks related to the use of AI. And the last few steps of continuous monitoring, looking at safeguards, controls, putting in place. And that last one, collaboration with people, policymakers, private sector, to create governance structures and building blocks for the AI. A lot of the standards talk about this communication collaboration. So for artificial intelligence, for me right now, this is critical as anything. Security and artificial intelligence, any of these angles need collaboration. So what am I doing? What have I found that can help other people? How do we do things more ethically? Because of the way I've done it, and I've made such a big mistake here. Of course, luckily a controlled issue, but it could be used more evilly in some other place. Google, do no evil, same sort of approach, collaboration. Number 5, the risk management. And look at the risks, put the framework in place. Okay. And a lot of good methodologies. I told you about the one for NIST. You could do this with any methodology, but go in and the risks of using artificial intelligence actually are. And that is a bit of thinking the first time you're doing this. What are there any ethical issues? Do we see potential ethical issues? And then look at those risks related to, how you can actually minimize it. I do think it's something that's actually quite fun the first time you're doing it, trying to understand the artificial intelligence environment. Implementing it, you would go all the way through to understanding the risks, looking at standards, making sure you've looked at the risk management practices. And there's a thing on case studies. Look to see what other people have done, how they benefit, what lessons have they learned, what is out there ready from other people. Okay, so understand it, make it conscious. There's this thing called an impact assessment in the standard, which is very similar to privacy. Privacy and AI, where you understand what the impact is of using it. So every time you're going to start using a new big artificial intelligence project, do an impact assessment. Go and analyze what the impact is of using AI in this context. So if you're clever, you do privacy and AI one together, and you understand those two issues. We spoke about this many times, transparency and accountability. But when you look at those 5 things, give you more detail on how to do that. And I do like that. So, is it explainable how you're using artificial intelligence? So can I trust it? Can I go, can you explain it to me in layman's term? Can you say to me, this is exactly how we do artificial intelligence. The outputs are derived in this way. And then we go and check it. We go and see the outputs and we bring it back to how it's explained in terms of AI. Gives you that basis. If you don't actually know what's happening, you can't explain it, then you're going to have these problems. You're going to have these issues with it. So understanding it is critical. That audit bias audits, go and check it. It doesn't always come out the same way. There were some really big cases 2 years ago where it came across with a lot of frankly racist, frankly sexist type of answers because it based it on an algorithmic bias. And it was making decisions based on stuff that was brought in with an inherent bias. So how do you take the inherent bias out and almost start again? And you think about it, that's where things get really interesting, because I might now, have a historical bias, and now you bring in information from scratch and you find the results are completely different. All women are bad drivers, and then you start from scratch, and then you realize that women are much better drivers than men because of the algorithmic bias. And that's probably an example that could very much happen through using this. You'll probably find, as anything, that it levels out, that neither is true because it's all based on inherent things which are emotional. So taking that out is very, very interesting with algorithmic bias. Document what you're doing. As we know, any standard, very strong on that. Make sure that our governance is documented, that you can get all the things, clear and comprehensive governance frameworks. How are we doing this? How is it documented? How do we check it? It ties into the next one. We can talk about training, because if you don't have it documented, you can't necessarily train effectively. And the ethics is the next one. Take the principles. What is ethics? How do we apply it? How does it come back to those first 3, explainable, algorithmic, and documented AI governance? And how do we have principles in place that are strongly ethical? And the more you focus on ethics, the more you understand that you want to do things in a way that doesn't bring out these results, the better that this process is going to be. And the stakeholder stuff again, getting people involved, making sure it meets needs and expectations, that the users are getting what they want out of it, the developers, the business owners, whatever you've got, that you can actually get the right information, the most useful information. I do see cases where you're doing something and then you realize you could actually use it in a different way. And you could then bring that back and go, sure, look what we can do as well. And you'd have to go back and do all these checks to see whether it meets those requirements. Okay, I use an example of, just making sure we keep it on time, an example of the case that happened very recently with the post office in the UK, where the post office started throwing people into jail and accusing people of fraud based on the fact that a system had flagged them and said that they were committing fraud. And this is now in the 1990s, long before artificial intelligence. And what had happened is people trusted the system inherently. So the IT people, the government, the lawyers, the judges, all these people were forced or not forced, whatever it was, to trust that this system was correct and that all these people were lying. And if you look, go and read up on it. There's a TV series on BBC talking about these submasters, these postmasters who were thrown in jail because of information being fed to them by a system. And this is to that point, almost 10 years ago, where you can see so much of that AI stuff coming through. If you were to take that system and to create it with artificial intelligence, and it was to make these pronouncements on people to say they were committing fraud without the right information, and throw them in jail, think about the implications, think about people's lives, but also think about the credibility of the whole system. And that one was kept quiet, people kept fighting and arguing it, and I can definitely see issues like that happening on AI, where you can do very similar. You can trust something based on you don't understand the AI, you don't understand the algorithmic bias. I think we're going to get questions at the end, so I'm not stopping for questions now. I know it's one of those, that's why you have to hear me talk for a long time, but I think that's the idea behind it. Okay, education. Critical, go and tell people about it, go and tell people what to do. I love this picture. It's about robots being trained, you training your AI, but investing is critical. It'll drive innovation, improve efficiency through organization. Those words we use quite a bit. But make sure that people know what they need to do. Any managed system is a critical aspect. With AI, there's a lot of new training you're going to have to do, not just to users, but to developers, to clients, stakeholders, management. Management might realize they can use this thing in ways that maybe you're not supposed to use it. You're going to have to do lots of education about that. That's the second last step, and then the last one is continuous improvement. So setting that system up so that it can be continuously improved, having a structured process to regularly review and update it, and make sure that it's improving. That we don't make that post office mistake. You know, they never fix that system until they've thrown 50 people in jail. And then the system then went through a late update and they started realizing that there were mistakes in that system. And they were too scared to bring that to people's accounts, which is one of the most horrendous things about the story, is that they then hit it. And that really is relevant for artificial intelligence. You know, you found out that now the system was actually biased, it was creating this different solutions and things were wrong. Do you go back and actually fix that, or do you just try and hide it now? And of course, we never want to hide it. There's never going to be an argument for doing that. You've got to be able to then say, we made mistakes in the past, go back, fix it. What is actually the impact on that? So continuous monitoring, critical. Again, picture from the AI tool in terms of continuous improvement in AI, which I think is cool minds and things changing. So why 42001? Some of those things are really what you need, compliance standard, improving efficiency, better security, getting compliant with something, and then making sure you manage your data correctly. So these four are ones you could apply to many other standards. And yes, if you do it correctly, you'll get that from 42001. The biggest one, again, is that comprehensive structured approach. So I've got a comprehensive and structured approach to artificial intelligence, and it brings together security, privacy, ethics, all those things into one comprehensive approach. Okay, and that's why whether or not a lot of companies are certified for a lot of standards, they've just implemented them for structure. So there is definitely an argument for doing that, yeah. Taking the standard and going, all right, let's come up with a structured approach using it. And maybe later on, let's look to see if there's value in certification. I think there is largely value because you've spent all the effort already doing it, but you might decide that you just want to align yourself to it, which is an angle that we highly recommend for people who are doing complex things in 42001. Sorry, in AI. Which does that question. Okay, to certify or not to certify, that's a really cool picture from the certification tool. You know, is the rock going to fall over whether you're certified or not certified? And I think, you know, the one that's not certified, maybe there's a hole there somewhere and things are going to fall over after a while, while the certification one is stronger. But we also strongly talk about certification by itself is not mean that you've got good security, you've got good artificial intelligence. It's just to show you a structured approach. You still need to have really effective processes. You still need to care about this and not trying to, you know, just tick the minimum level of effort involved. Fortunately, we have seen that in many cases. Okay, so not just certification, it's about it, but certification can help in terms of that. We think that certification is not necessarily the primary drive for a lot of companies right now, but there's value in applying the standard. If you want to later on wait for the changes, wait for the updates, or even certify because you've got pressure, it's no big deal. But always great getting certified, but it's not necessarily critical at this juncture for most people. Okay, and I think it's the argument for and the argument for against. So if you do it quickly, you can show some credibility. You're ahead of the curve. You're talking about your reputation and your competitiveness. Structure, structure, structure. Everything about these things is giving a really nice structure in place. You're continuously managing your artificial intelligence management system. AIMS was the word there. Your developers are doing things in a responsible way. They're focused on ethics. They're focused on transparency, and they're looking at innovation. And the last one is that you can adapt. So the EU Act has certain things in there which ties very nicely to 40001. So if you have to apply the EU AI Act. You can say we're certified against 42001. We're using 42001. That's how we apply Statement 14, Statement 15, because we've got clear links behind it. And that's something very much to take into account for people in the EU who are very closely tied to that act. The why not is the stuff I spoke about earlier. Things are changing quickly. The standard was developed very quickly. It's still quite an immature standard. I do think those controls are things where you've got to go and, maybe spend another 2-3 months and going, how comprehensive are these controls? Could we have put more in there? Could we link them to other standards, as an example? And that's what we said. You could do 27,001. The laws are changing constantly. So is the standard going to be changing with the laws as they're changing? I don't think the EU AI Act was taken into account when 42,001 was drawn up. It might have been at a draft level, but not at a final level. And that last one, no one knows about this thing yet. Every time I speak to somebody in artificial intelligence and I tell them about 42,001, they go, really? Is there one? A lot of people I've spoken to in general don't know about this act. It's been around for 2 years already. Hardly anyone actually knew about it, knows about it. We downloaded it very quickly because we've applied how we can, use it at clients, and we've been doing stuff quite a while. But every time I tell people I'm doing a course on a conference about it, people often go, really? I haven't heard of that before. Okay, so that's where I think a lot of these, that's why this is such a great mechanism, getting it out there, talking to people about it.
Muy bien. Entonces, hemos escuchado al orador o al experto, mejor dicho, en IA, ¿no? En la ISO 42001, ¿no? 2023, muy bien, Sistema de Gestión de Inteligencia Artificial, muy bien. Entonces, voy a proceder a explicar de manera resumida nada más los puntos más importantes, muy bien. Esto es como una reflexión, ¿no? Sobre la inteligencia artificial, la innovación y los estándares, muy bien. Entonces, el orador, quien parece estar dando una presentación o charla, inicia con una reflexión, ¿no? Sobre la inteligencia artificial, la IA, ¿no? Y su papel en el mundo actual. Entonces, comienza mencionando que él mismo ha usado la IA para crear la presentación que está mostrando. Y luego se sumerge en una serie de ideas sobre cómo la IA está moldeando tanto nuestra forma de trabajar como de pensar. Muy bien. Claro, ya existen herramientas IA, ¿no? Que yo le pongo un prompt y sale automáticamente presentaciones. Muy bien. Muy bien. Aquí en esta presentación que ha puesto el experto en IA, ¿no? Menciona algunos aspectos principales. Por ejemplo, la IA como herramienta, no como un reemplazo, hay que tenerlo presente. ¿Qué quiere decir esto? Que el orador enfatiza que si bien la IA es una herramienta poderosa, no reemplazará a las personas. Muy bien, en cambio, aquellos que aprendan a usar la IA de forma innovadora y estratégica tendrán una ventaja sobre los demás. Utiliza la metáfora de alguien mirando, aburrido, para representar a aquellos que no están adoptando la IA, muy bien, como una herramienta versus aquellos, ¿no? Que la están usando creativamente, muy bien. Otro punto importante es la necesidad de innovar, ¿no? El orador destaca la importancia de la innovación al abordar la IA. Menciona que se necesita una mentalidad innovadora para poder realmente entender y aprovechar los links que la IA puede brindar. Muy bien. Esto sugiere que más allá de simplemente usar la IA, se debe pensar creativamente sobre cómo aplicarla a diferentes problemas. Muy bien. Otro punto importante que menciona el autor es el peligro de la sobreconfianza. ¿Qué quiere decir esto? Se hace un llamado a no sobreconfiar en la IA, ¿no? Enfatiza que aunque la IA es útil, es importante entender sus limitaciones. No es suficiente con aplicar la IA de forma ciega. También es necesario entender cómo funciona y qué impacto tiene especialmente en áreas sensibles como la toma de decisiones. Muy bien. Otro punto importante es que menciona es el papel de los estándares, ¿no? El orador empieza a hablar de la ISO 42001 y la necesidad de entender las normas antes de tomar el camino de la certificación. Para ello hace un par de comparaciones con otros estándares del mercado para que quede clara la diferenciación. Muy bien. Otro punto es, por ejemplo, la importancia de la ética en la IA. El video, ¿no? Pasa a mencionar la importancia de la ética en el desarrollo y uso de la IA. Subraya que los sistemas de la IA deben ser transparentes y explicables, de forma que se pueda entender por qué toman ciertas decisiones, ¿no? Enfatiza que hay que prestar atención a que los datos utilizados para entrenar la IA no introduzcan sesgos discriminatorios. Muy bien. Se mencionan ejemplos de sistemas de IA, ¿no? Que al basarse en datos históricos perpetúen sesgos raciales, de género o de otro tipo. Muy bien, hay que tener presente eso. Muy bien, otro punto importante es que la evolución constante de la IA y las leyes constantemente están evolucionando. El orador, ¿no? O el experto en IA menciona que el entorno de la IA es de constante cambio, lo que hace que las leyes, ¿no? Y las regulaciones también tengan que evolucionar continuamente. Muy bien. Menciona cómo las organizaciones deben estar preparadas para adaptarse, ¿no? A estos cambios, en los que también se incluyen las regulaciones de la Unión Europea. Muy bien. Otro punto importante es la necesidad de monitoreo y mejora constante, también lo menciona. El video subraya la importancia de monitorear, ¿no? El desempeño de la IA, buscando continuamente formas de mejorarla y asegurar que siga cumpliendo los requisitos éticos y legales. Se menciona también la importancia del feedback de los involucrados, ¿no? Para poder mejorar continuamente. Muy bien. Otro punto importante también es la importancia de usar las herramientas correctas, ¿no? En esta parte del video, en la cual observamos, el ponente hace referencia a lo que es mejor para diferentes situaciones, ¿no? Menciona que se ha visto un caso en que se usaba la inteligencia artificial para decidir si es jugador, ¿no? O si un jugador, perdón, iba a tirar el penal para un lado o al otro. Y esto demuestra que es necesario evaluar la inteligencia artificial que estás usando para la tarea que quieras realizar. Muy bien. Otro punto importante es, por ejemplo, el cuidado con los fraudes ¿no? de imitación, los deepfakes. Muy bien. El orador advierte que la IA también puede ser utilizada para crear deepfakes, ¿no? Imitaciones de imágenes o videos de personas, por lo que debemos tener cuidado con lo que confiamos, ya que la tecnología lo permite, ¿no? Muy bien, pero que un punto clave es el monitoreo y la gestión de la información. Muy bien. Y acá hay unas conclusiones que podemos notar. Por ejemplo, la IA no es una solución mágica. Muy bien. La transparencia y la explicabilidad son clave. La ética requiere una atención continua. Muy bien. Y el cambio es la constante. Muy bien. La certificación no es una balada de plata, o no es una bala de plata, ¿no? Por decir así, ¿no? Después, la educación es esencial. Muy bien. Entonces, para concluir, el video presenta una visión realista y equilibrada de la IA, enfatizando, por ejemplo, su potencial para mejorar, pero advirtiendo sobre los riesgos que conllevan si no se aborda con mucho cuidado. Muy bien. Y con un marco ético y de responsabilidad bien definido. Muy bien. La clave está en adoptar la IA de manera innovadora, muy bien, creativa, transparente y con un compromiso continuo hacia la mejora y el aprendizaje. Muy bien. Entonces espero que este video les haya encantado, ¿no? Los que compran, por ejemplo, el voucher o el taller práctico, ¿no? o las plantillas, nosotros le enviamos los videos transcritos al español, ¿no? Muy bien, todo el video, o sea, son varios videos, muy bien, son varios videos transcritos al español, ¿no? Acá vemos que hay una serie de, bueno, este material y también todos los materiales, ¿no? Todos los materiales, por ejemplo, acá tenemos, si queremos ver los materiales, ¿no? De este curso, ¿no? Nosotros, son videos en inglés, pero nosotros lo transcribimos al español, muy bien. Es una serie de videos, muy bien. Por ejemplo, yo voy aquí, ¿no? Linkeo y aquí yo puedo ver, ¿no? Todos los videos, muy bien. Todos los videos que están acá, muy bien. Nosotros se lo pasamos al español, transcritos, muy bien, para que, digamos, puedan leerlo, ¿no? Y puedan interpretarlo, muy bien. Bueno, ya están, están transcritos, están al español, muy bien, están bien transcritos, ¿no? Muy bien, entonces, por ejemplo, nosotros ofrecemos tres modalidades, ¿no? Uno, cuando quieren el voucher está $200, ¿no? Le enviamos el acceso a la plataforma, los videos, ¿no? Todos los materiales transcritos. El simulador es en español, el simulador es premium, ¿no? Son 400 preguntas el simulador. El examen viene en español también, muy bien, son 40 preguntas. Después, muy bien, el acceso a la plataforma, ¿no? Etcétera, y otros materiales más, ¿no? Los casos prácticos también, muy bien. Eso está $200. Si alguien quiere el curso taller, la cual incluye plantillas profesionales, por ejemplo, nosotros tenemos ya un caso acá completo, ¿no? Si alguien quiere verlo, por ejemplo, por aquí, tenemos por acá, por ejemplo, tenemos varios acá, ¿no? Acá tenemos, por ejemplo, acá, ¿no? Ya está todo planeado, ya está todo estructurado. Por ejemplo, acá en el numeral 4 ya tenemos, ¿no? Todo documentado, contexto de la organización, por ejemplo, ¿no? Tenemos aquí requisitos de la parte interesada, todo orientado a la inteligencia artificial, muy bien. El alcance de, ¿no? del sistema de gestión de inteligencia artificial, numeral 5, la política también. Tenemos acá, por ejemplo, la gestión de riesgos, tenemos la metodología, ¿no? El procedimiento de gestión de riesgos que va a llamar a la hoja de análisis de riesgo, los criterios de evaluación de riesgos y la declaración de aplicabilidad. Muy bien. Después, los objetivos, acá tenemos el plan de gestión de objetivos, que va a invocar a la implementación de objetivos y al seguimiento de objetivos. Y planificación de cambio, tenemos política de gestión de cambio de SGIA, que va a invocar al formato de cambio de SGIA. Muy bien. Y de ahí tenemos el numeral 7, por ejemplo, que de 7.1, que prácticamente son los procedimientos de recursos humanos, no, procedimientos de recursos humanos y capacitación, política de formación y concientización, análisis de habilidades, ¿no? Múltiples, informe de formación, informe de capacitación e inducción, hoja de registro de competencia y capacitación inteligente para los empleados, calendario de entrenamiento y descripción y especificación del trabajo. Muy bien, y el 7.2 tenemos, por ejemplo, el plan de formación y concientización, y acá también, ¿no? El plan de formación y concientización. Y 7.4 el plan de comunicaciones orientado a la IA. Y el 7.5 tenemos el procedimiento para el control de documentos y registro orientado a la IA, que va a llamar a la lista de distribución de documentos y a la lista de control de registro, ¿no? Igualmente tenemos las otras fases, ¿no? La fase de ejecución, la de monitoreo y mejora continua. Bien, entonces nosotros tenemos tres modalidades, ¿no? Una es, que les había mencionado, $200 con todo lo que se ha indicado. Después tenemos uno, curso taller con certificación internacional, eso está a $550, incluye el voucher, incluye las plantillas y toda la capacitación. Muy bien. Y después tenemos, eso dura unos 50 horas. Muy bien. En fin, bueno, al final tenemos esas dos modalidades, ¿no? Y la tercera es, si alguien quiere adquirir las plantillas, ¿no? Para implementar un SGI IA, lo estamos dejando en $400. Muy bien. Muy bien. Mi nombre es Samuel Alejandro Izarra Foronda, mi WhatsApp es 993-261-682. Pueden entrar al link www.corsite.com para más información. Muy bien. Bueno, espero que les haya gustado el videito. Nos vemos para un próximo video. Muchísimas gracias. Muy buenas noches.